and welcome back. Last lesson we looked at how to go ahead and mask text and create different kind of effects that way. But what's if I wanted to do something with, for example, an image? So that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to do something pretty simple. To get started, I've gone ahead and already imported an image into my stage here. I've also renamed the layers so I can keep track of that. And I'm just going to go ahead and use my free transformation tool to make sure that this image is going to be large enough to effectively cover my entire canvas. So I can go ahead and stretch it out until I get to the point where that looks pretty good so that I don't have any white space left. And of course, if it hangs over a little bit, that's okay. Now the next thing I want to do is create my mask layer. So we're going to create a new layer. And I'm just going to call this mask underscore layer. And the reason I have to use an underscore because if I use it and or put a space there, if I say mask space layer, Animate will complain and say you can't use that kind of character. And then of course it will just change it accordingly. But what we want to do is create a shape that's going to act as our mask, kind of like we did before. But this time let's go ahead and use an oval tool. And I'm just going to go ahead and draw an oval here that's going to cover the majority of my water. Now, of course, we can get more specific, but just for today's purpose, this will be enough. Now, I do want to point out we can, of course, use our selection tool to come near our corners here to grab these edges and kind of stretch this shape out just a little bit more so it might cover more of the region we're trying to work with here. And I'm just going to pull that down just a little bit. And that looks pretty good right there. The next thing I want to do is grab my eraser tool. And I want to go ahead and make this so that, let's say this is a puddle, there's probably wind, which means there's probably rippling effects going on within this water. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Shift key to create straight lines that are going to go through this. Now, of course, you can make this so the lines, for example, are narrower the farther away you are, and they get wider the closer you get. So you, of course, have some flexibility in how you want to do this. But again, just holding down that Shift key, we're just going to go ahead and draw some lines here into our mask. And that looks pretty good right there. And what I want to do now is insert my appropriate number of frames. So let's just say we're going to go for 45 frames here. So let's go ahead and insert those. I want to put a keyframe on frame number 45 because this is going to end up being a classic tween that we do here. So let's go to our first frame, right click, insert a create classic tween. It will tell us, hey, this needs to be a symbol, so that's not a problem. And now that we have our symbol created, we can jump to the last frame of our animation here. And what I want to do is actually, let's just go to our selection tool, and I just want to make it so that this tween is going to stretch down. Now I couldn't, or stretch it out and stuff like that, but because I'm going for more of a ripple effect, is effectively just going to make this push down. So I'm just going to use my arrow key and tap this down just a few frames here just to go ahead and see how that looks. And of course, if I were to play this, you can see that would be the movement just by dragging that through my frames that I would see that ripple effect go through. Now on frame 45, there is one other setting we need to change. So I'm going to click on my mask shape that I did. And here we have our color effects tab. The thing we want to change here is we want to go to our alpha region. And we want to make sure that alpha is set to 0, because what that's going to do is allow that shape to effectively act as part of our background here. And of course, we will still see it here, but if you can see, if I were to kind of move through those frames, you can see how that kind of fades away. And that gives us a nice kind of transition to work with. Now, I do want to make a copy of my background layer here, but sometimes Animate can be a little fickle. So what we're actually going to do is not just duplicate that layer, because we can do that. We actually want to make a copy of the shape of the structure that is actually behind it. So this image that I inserted earlier, I'm just going to go ahead with my free transformation tool, click on that, do Control C to copy that. I'm then going to create a new layer, and let's go ahead and call this resize. And what I'm going to do with that new layer is I'm going to do edit, then I'm going to do paste in place. And what that's going to allow me to do is make sure that that copy and pasted image is in exactly the same spot as the original. And then I'm going to grab resize. I'm actually going to pull him down. So background now is going to be the layer that's affected by the mask layer. And I want to take resize and actually just shrink that in just a little bit. So just go ahead and move that in just a little bit here. It's okay if the width changes a little bit too, but we want to bring that down so it kind of fits a little bit more closer to some of our canvas size properties. On my mask layer now, we can go ahead and mask. Just like we did with text, right click and mask. And of course, now we have a new layer here. And of course, you can see it's constrained itself to that smaller layer that I had done. So if I say, oh, I don't want this white space in my canvas, I can just back that up with Control Z. And I can go back to that resize layer and say I want to pull that down so make sure it gets that full canvas. So we of course have some options here and flexibility of how we do this. So again, right click mask. That looks a lot cleaner. And now if I were to play my animation, we can see we have a very subtle ripple effect in here. And in fact, I can zoom this in just a little bit here. So you can see that just a little bit more. So when I press play, you can see where our mask is. We now have this kind of subtle ripple effect moving through the water. It's very subtle, but it does work and does meet our needs. And we, of course, can fine-tune this. We can come here, edit our mask, make this a lot more fluid, make it much more believable. But just for the purpose of learning here today, this is a quick how-to. You can do different things such as, for example, you say, those ripple effects aren't really that wide. Maybe I want to make those bigger. You can come here to your eraser tool, for example, and increase the size of your eraser. So you might have, for example, larger ripples. Maybe it's a much breezier day. Or you could add in more ripples. You can add a wider shape that then maybe encompasses the entire size of this puddle. Or maybe you're using multiple shapes. So you can have a more fine-tooth control. So for example, you might have one main oval that covers this region, but then maybe you're using another oval for over here, maybe one for up here, and maybe even one that's going to cover the bottom here. So again, you can get more control based upon what shapes you're using. So what I want you to do is challenge yourself. Go ahead and at least do that one basic shape, but try to put in 2 or 3 other shapes that you can put in there to really give yourself some more control. Play around with things such as the eraser tool to give yourself some more size and depth to that image. And again, use the same process that I just showed you to go ahead and create your own masking effect on an image.